When I turned 14, my parents finally deemed me responsible enough to spend weekends alone at our family's cabin. Not the main house in Portland, that came later, but the old timber cabin my grandfather built in the dense forests of the Cascade Mountains, about 40 miles from any real civilization. My father had inherited the property after Grandpa Morris passed, and though we only used it a few times a year, Dad was obsessed with maintaining it. He'd drive up monthly to check the generator, clear fallen branches, and make sure squirrels hadn't nested in the walls. That October, he couldn't make his usual maintenance trip. A work conference in Seattle conflicted with his schedule. My mother suggested they both go, make a weekend of it, celebrate their anniversary properly. But someone needed to check on the cabin. The weather report predicted heavy storms, and Dad worried about the old roof.
"Marcus is old enough," Mom said, looking at me across the dinner table.
"He's proven himself responsible." I had. Perfect attendance at school, honor roll. I'd even been babysitting the Henderson twins down the street for 6 months without incident. Dad seemed less certain. "It's pretty isolated up there, son. No neighbors for miles. Cell reception is spotty at best." "There's the landline," I reminded him. "And I've been going there since I was 6. I know that cabin better than our house." After considerable debate, they agreed. They'd drop me off Friday evening, and I'd spend the weekend doing basic maintenance, checking the roof, making sure the pipes hadn't frozen, testing the generator. They'd pick me up Sunday afternoon. The cabin sat in a clearing surrounded by Douglas firs and western hemlocks, some over 200 feet tall. The forest pressed in on all sides, dense and primordial. During the day, it was beautiful. At night, it became something else entirely. They dropped me off just as the sun started its descent behind the mountains. Mom had packed enough food for a week: sandwiches, chips, canned soup, a box of frozen pizzas for the propane-powered freezer, and an entire bag of Halloween candy, even though we were 2 weeks past the holiday. "Emergency numbers are on the fridge," Dad said, handing me a flashlight with fresh batteries. "The satellite phone is in the kitchen drawer if the landline goes out. Don't forget to check the generator before bed, keep the fire going, don't use all the propane," I recited. "Dad, I've got this." He smiled, but I could see the worry in his eyes. "I know you do, son." After they left, the silence settled over the cabin like a heavy blanket. It wasn't the silence of our suburban home, where you could still hear distant traffic or neighbors mowing lawns. This was absolute silence, the kind that made your ears ring, that made you aware of your own heartbeat. I did exactly what Dad would have done. Checked the generator, running smoothly. Inspected the roof from the ground, no obvious damage. Tested the water, clear and cold from the well. Everything was fine. By 8 o'clock, I'd made myself 2 pepperoni pizzas in the propane oven and settled in front of the old tube TV. We only got 3 channels up here, and the picture was snowy. But I found a Twilight Zone marathon and decided that was perfect. Around 9:30, I heard the first sound, a knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the front door. I muted the TV. The knocking had stopped. I waited, listening to that profound silence, wondering if I'd imagined it. Then it came again. 3 knocks. Slow, measured, patient. I got up and approached the door. "Hello?" No response. The cabin had windows on either side of the door, but Dad had installed heavy curtains years ago. I pulled one aside slightly and peered out. Nothing. Just the clearing bathed in moonlight, and beyond it, the wall of trees. "Who's there?" I called out, louder this time. Silence. I stood there for a full minute, heart pounding, before returning to the couch. Probably a branch falling against the door, or an animal. Deer sometimes wandered through the clearing. I tried to focus on the TV, but I'd lost interest. The cabin suddenly felt smaller, the darkness outside the windows more oppressive. At 10 o'clock, I decided to go to bed. I locked the front door, something we rarely did, and checked the back door too. locked. I made sure all the windows were secure, then climbed the ladder to the loft where my sleeping bag was laid out.
From up there, I had a view of the entire cabin below and the large front window that looked out onto the clearing. I left one small lamp burning downstairs. Complete darkness felt wrong tonight. I was just dozing off when I heard footsteps on the porch. Not animal footsteps. These were distinctly human. Slow, heavy boots crossing the wooden planks. I sat up, straining to hear. The footsteps stopped at the door. I waited for another knock. Instead, I heard the doorknob rattle. Someone was trying to open the door. I climbed down from the loft as quietly as possible, my mouth dry with fear. The doorknob had stopped rattling, but I could see a shadow through the gap at the bottom of the door. Someone was standing right there. "Who is it?" My voice came out as barely a whisper. I cleared my throat and tried again, louder. "Who's there? I'm calling the police." The shadow didn't move. I grabbed the landline phone from the kitchen. Dead. The storm Dad had worried about must have knocked out the lines. I remembered the satellite phone in the drawer and fumbled for it with shaking hands. When I looked back at the door, the shadow was gone. I ran to the window and peered out through the curtains. The clearing was empty. Nothing moved among the trees. But then I saw it. At the edge of the clearing where the forest began, there was a figure, tall and utterly still, standing between two massive firs. The moonlight couldn't penetrate the shadows there, so I couldn't make out any details. Just a dark silhouette, human-shaped, watching the cabin. I dropped the curtain and backed away from the window, clutching the satellite phone. My hands shook so badly I could barely punch in 911. Nothing happened. No dial tone. No connection. I checked the phone. The battery was dead, completely drained, even though Dad had said he'd just charged it last month. Panic started to set in. I was alone, 40 miles from town, with no phone and something, outside. I thought about my parents' car keys. They'd taken their vehicle, and I didn't have a license anyway. The nearest neighbor was old Mr. Hutchins, but his property was at least 6 miles away through dense forest. In daylight, with a trail, maybe. At night? Impossible. I returned to the window, compelled to look despite my terror. The figure was closer now. It had crossed half the clearing while I'd been fumbling with the phone. It stood perfectly motionless in the moonlight, and I could see it was wearing what looked like old, tattered clothing. But I still couldn't make out a face. The head was tilted at a strange angle, like it was listening. As I watched, it took another step toward the cabin, then another. Each movement was wrong somehow, too smooth, too deliberate, like a puppet on strings. I stumbled away from the window and grabbed the fireplace poker. It was the closest thing to a weapon in the cabin. Dad kept a hunting rifle in a locked cabinet, but I didn't know where he kept the key. The footsteps returned to the porch. This time, they didn't stop. They circled the entire cabin slowly. I could track them by sound, across the front porch, down the side, around the back, up the other side, back to the front. Then, silence. I waited, poker gripped in both hands, listening so intently my head hurt. A face appeared in the front window. I screamed and jumped back. The face was pressed against the glass, pale and distorted, but it wasn't looking at me. The head was turned sideways, pressed against the window like someone trying to hear inside. Then it slowly rotated, and I saw its eyes. They were completely black, not dark brown or shadowed, black like empty sockets, like holes in reality. The face smiled. Then it vanished. I heard rapid footsteps running around the cabin, fast now, not slow and measured. They circled once, twice, 3 times, faster each time, until they became a continuous pounding that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Then they stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise.
I stood in the middle of the cabin, poker raised, spinning slowly to watch all the windows and doors at once. A child's voice came from outside, high and sweet. "Please help me. I'm lost." It came from the back of the cabin, near the kitchen window. "Please, I'm scared. Can you help me find my parents?" I didn't move. Every instinct screamed at me not to respond, not to go to that window. "Please!" The voice became more insistent. "There's something chasing me. Please let me in." I crept toward the kitchen, poker ready. Through the small window above the sink, I could see a small figure standing in the darkness. It looked like a child, maybe 8 or 9 years old, wearing old-fashioned clothing. "Please!" It raised its arms toward the window. "It's coming! Please!" As my eyes adjusted, I saw it more clearly in the moonlight, filtering through the trees. Its arms were too long, far too long. They reached nearly to the ground, and they bent at too many joints. The child thing tilted its head up, and I saw its face clearly for the first time. It had no mouth, just smooth skin where a mouth should be, but the voice continued anyway. "Please help me. Please help me. Please help me. Please." The voice continued, unchanging, while the thing's head rotated completely around, then around again, like a carousel. I backed away from the window, bile rising in my throat. Something hit the front door with tremendous force. The whole cabin shook. Then again, and again. Something was trying to break down the door. The pounding continued in a steady rhythm. Boom, boom, boom. The door was solid oak, built by my grandfather to withstand harsh mountain winters, but I could see it shuddering in its frame. I ran to the loft ladder and climbed up, dragging the poker with me. From up there, I'd have a better vantage point, and there was a small window that opened onto the roof. If I needed to escape, that was my only option. The pounding stopped. In the silence that followed, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Scratching. Something was on the roof directly above me, scratching at the shingles. Long, slow scrapes, like fingernails or claws. I looked up at the ceiling. The scratching moved across it, following a path from the front of the cabin toward the back. Then it stopped above the stone chimney. I held my breath, listening. Something started coming down the chimney. I could hear it scraping against the stone, descending slowly. The fireplace downstairs was cold. I hadn't lit it tonight, and I could see straight down into it from my position in the loft. A sound echoed up from the fireplace, a wet, ragged breathing. Then a hand reached out from the darkness of the firebox. It was pale, almost luminescent in the dim light. The fingers were too long, the joints bent backward. It groped along the stone hearth, feeling, searching. Another hand joined it. Then a head began to emerge. I couldn't see it clearly from my angle, but I could see enough. The way it moved was wrong, sliding out of the chimney like a snake, joints bending in ways that defied human anatomy. I grabbed my sleeping bag and shoved it against the small window in the loft, blocking it. Then I wedged myself into the corner farthest from the ladder, poker raised. The thing pulled itself completely out of the fireplace. I could hear it moving around below, footsteps soft and irregular. It was searching the cabin. I heard drawers opening, cabinet doors creaking. It was looking for something. Or looking for me. A horrible thought struck me. What if there was more than one? As if in answer, I heard the front door open. I hadn't heard it unlock. I hadn't heard it break. It simply opened. Multiple sets of footsteps entered the cabin. 3, 4, I couldn't tell. They spread out, searching systematically. One set of footsteps approached the ladder to the loft. I gripped the poker so tightly my hands ached. If something came up that ladder, I'd swing with everything I had. The ladder creaked. Something was climbing up. I saw a hand grip the top rung. Those same 2 long fingers, joints bending backward. Then a head rose into view. It looked almost human at first glance, but the proportions were wrong. The eyes were too large and set too far apart, the mouth stretched too wide, and the skin had a waxy, translucent quality. It saw me. Its mouth opened impossibly wide, unhinging like a snake's jaw, and a sound came out that I can still hear in my nightmares, a high, keening wail that seemed to vibrate in my bones. I swung the poker. It connected with the side of the thing's head with a meaty thunk. The creature didn't recoil or fall. It simply stopped, head cocked at that unnatural angle, studying me. Then it smiled. I hit it again, harder this time. The poker went right through its head as if it were made of mist. The creature wavered like a reflection in disturbed water, then solidified again. It reached for me with those backward-jointed hands. I scrambled away, pressing myself against the wall. There was nowhere left to go. The creature climbed fully into the loft, followed by another, then another. They surrounded me, their two large eyes reflecting the dim light like animals. One of them spoke, and its voice was my mother's. "Marcus, honey, what's wrong?" Another spoke in my father's voice. "Son, you're being irrational." A third spoke in my sister's voice. "You're scaring me, Marcus. Why are you scaring me?" They moved closer, hands reaching. I closed my eyes and screamed. When I opened my eyes again, everything had changed. I was still in the loft, but it was daylight. Golden sunlight streamed through the window. The sleeping bag lay neatly beside me. The poker rested against the wall where it always sat. I scrambled to the ladder and looked down into the cabin. Everything was normal, neat, undisturbed. My pizza from last night sat on the counter, only 2 slices missing. The TV was off. The fireplace was clean. There was no sign of forced entry, no scratches, no evidence that anything had happened. I checked my watch. It was 7:15 a.m. Saturday morning. Had I dreamed it all? Some terrible nightmare? But I knew I hadn't. The terror was too real, too visceral. Something had happened last night. Something had been in the cabin. I grabbed my backpack and stuffed in some food and water. I wasn't staying here another night. I'd hike the 6 miles to Mr. Hutchins' place and call my parents from there. I was halfway to the door when I saw it. On the kitchen table sat a Polaroid photograph that hadn't been there before. My hands shook as I picked it up. It was a photo of me, asleep in the loft last night, taken from directly above, as if someone had been standing on the ceiling, looking down. In the background of the photo, barely visible in the darkness, were dozens of pale faces, all of them watching me sleep, all of them smiling. I ran. I burst out of the cabin into the morning sunlight and ran toward the trail that led to the old logging road. 6 miles through the forest. I'd covered maybe half a mile when I realized something was wrong. The trail was gone. I'd hiked this path 100 times. I knew every turn, every landmark, but nothing looked familiar. The trees seemed denser, older. The undergrowth was different. I kept going, thinking I'd just gotten turned around. But after another mile, I knew for certain. This wasn't right. The forest had changed. I stopped to catch my breath and check my compass. The needle spun wildly, never settling on any direction. I tried my watch. It had stopped at 3:33 a.m., right around when the knocking had first started. "Hello?" I spun around. The voice had come from behind me. "Hello? Is someone there?" It was a woman's voice, desperate and frightened. "Please, I need help!" Every fiber of my being told me to run, to not respond. But what if someone really was in trouble? What if there was another person out here, as lost and scared as I was? "Where are you?" I called back. "I can't see you! Please, keep talking!" I moved toward the voice, pushing through undergrowth. "I'm here! I'm coming! Please hurry! It's getting dark!" Dark? I looked up. The sun was still high in the sky. I stopped moving. "Where are you?" the voice called again, and this time I heard it clearly. It was coming from multiple directions at once. The same voice, speaking in perfect synchronization, surrounding me. "Please hurry! Please hurry! Please hurry!" The voices overlapped, echoing through the trees, multiplying until there were hundreds of them, all calling the same words. I ran blindly, crashing through branches, not caring about the trail anymore. I just needed to get away from those voices. I burst into a clearing and stopped. It was the cabin clearing. I'd somehow circled back. But something was different. There were items scattered around the clearing. Backpacks, camping gear, a child's stuffed bear, weathered and faded, a woman's jacket, torn and moldy, a man's hiking boot, and more. Dozens of items. Years' worth of belongings, all slowly being reclaimed by the forest. I approached the cabin slowly. The door stood open. Inside, the cabin was wrong. The furniture was the same, but it was all rotted and covered in moss. Vines grew through cracks in the walls. The roof had partially collapsed, letting in shafts of dusty sunlight. This wasn't my cabin. Or rather, it was my cabin, but years, decades in the future. Abandoned and decaying. On the kitchen table, exactly where I'd found the Polaroid, sat a stack of photographs. I didn't want to look. I knew I shouldn't, but I couldn't stop myself. The top photo showed a young couple standing in front of the cabin. They were smiling, arms around each other. The photo was old, faded. Based on their clothing, I guessed 1970s. The next photo showed the same couple. They weren't smiling anymore. They looked exhausted, terrified, standing in the same spot, but the cabin behind them looked different, older, more decrepit. The third photo showed just the man. He was alone, haggard, holding a sign that read, "Help us, day 47. Day 47? That was impossible. They looked like they'd aged years. The fourth photo showed the man lying on the cabin floor. His eyes were open, staring at nothing. I flipped through more photos, different people, different eras. A family from the 1980s, a group of teenagers from the 1990s, a solo hiker from what looked like the early 2000s. All of them showed the same progression. Arrival, confusion, fear, desperation, and finally, nothing. Empty photos of the cabin, gradually decaying, with personal belongings scattered about. The last photo in the stack was of me. I was standing exactly where I stood now, looking down at the photographs in my hands. The photo had been taken seconds ago. I dropped the stack and backed away, looking around wildly. Who had taken it? Where were they? "Hello, Marcus." The voice came from behind me. I spun around. Standing in the doorway was my grandfather. Grandpa Morris had died 5 years ago. I'd been at his funeral. But here he was, looking exactly as I remembered him. Flannel shirt, worn jeans, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Grandpa?" He smiled sadly. "Not exactly, son, but I wear his face because I thought it might comfort you." "What are you? Where am I?" "You're exactly where you think you are. My cabin, my forest, my world now." He stepped inside and I noticed he didn't disturb the dust on the floor. He left no footprints. "I don't understand." "This place exists between moments, Marcus, between the tick and the talk. Your grandfather knew about it. That's why he built the cabin here, to keep watch over the boundary, to make sure nothing crossed over." "You're not making sense." "When Morris died, the boundary weakened. Things started to slip through. And time here, time moves differently. A night in my world can be years in yours. Some people spend what feels like days here and emerge to find decades have passed. Others," he gestured to the photographs, "others never leave." "No," I shook my head. "No, this isn't real. I'm going to wake up." "You are awake, Marcus. More awake than you've ever been. You can feel it, can't you? How thin reality is here, how easily it bends." He was right. The cabin seemed to shift and waver when I wasn't looking directly at it. The sunlight streaming through the windows moved wrong, casting shadows that didn't match the objects that made them. What do you want from me? The same thing I wanted from all of them. He gestured to the photographs. Company. Understanding. Someone to witness what I am, what this place is. Your grandfather understood. He spent 50 years keeping watch, feeding me stories, keeping me satisfied with tales instead of souls. Feeding you? I am this place, Marcus. The forest, the cabin, the space between. I am the thin spot where your world touches something older, darker. And I am so very hungry. The cabin shuddered. The rot accelerated before my eyes. Wood turned to pulp. Glass cracked and fell away. The ceiling collapsed inward, and yet somehow I wasn't touched by falling debris. When the dust settled, I was standing in a ruin, and surrounding me, standing among the decay, were all the people from the photographs. The couple from the 70s, the family from the 80s, the teenagers, the hiker, dozens of others I hadn't seen in the photos. All of them watching me with those too large, too dark eyes. Your grandfather's bargain protected you, the thing wearing his face said. But he's gone now. And you came here alone, unprotected. You fed yourself to me. I'm leaving. I started toward the door. The cabin rebuilt itself in an instant, pristine and whole, blocking my path. You already left, Marcus. Days ago. Weeks ago. Your parents came looking for you. They found the cabin empty, your belongings scattered. They searched for months, years. Eventually, they gave up. You're lying. Am I? He pointed to the kitchen table. A new photograph sat there. My parents, much older than I remembered, standing in front of a headstone. I couldn't read the name from where I stood, but I knew whose it was. Time is different here, he said again. Elastic, malleable. You've been here for minutes, and already it's been months out there. Stay an hour, and you'll emerge to find everyone you knew has died of old age. Stay a day. Stop it! Or you could stay forever, he said softly. Join the others. Exist in the space between moments. It's not so bad, really. You stop feeling hunger, or cold, or pain. You just exist, witnessing, watching, eternal. The figures around me moved closer, and I could see they weren't quite solid. They were like the thing on the ladder, wavering, translucent, caught between states of being. I won't, I said. I'll find a way out. They all said that. He gestured to the others. Some lasted hours, fighting, trying to escape. Some lasted days. One lasted nearly a month before she gave in. But they all gave in eventually. Because there is no out, Marcus. There's only deeper in and surrender. I looked around desperately for some escape, some solution. My eyes fell on the fireplace. The fireplace. Grandpa kept you satisfied with stories, I said slowly. Tales instead of souls. The thing smiled. Yes. What if I could do the same? You think you can match 50 years of your grandfather's storytelling in one night? I don't need to. I pulled out my phone. It was dead, had been since last night. But the photos in the memory. I'd taken hundreds of photos over the years. Pictures of friends, family, school events, trips. Each one was a moment, a memory, a story. What if I could give you something better than stories? I said. What if I could give you moments? Real moments, captured and frozen. Each photo is a doorway to a time and place. Each one is a piece of the world beyond here. The thing tilted its head, interested. Show me. I knew the phone wouldn't turn on, but I held it anyway, and I told it about the photos. the camping trip where my dad taught me to fish, my sister's graduation, Christmas morning when I was 8, my best friend Jake's birthday party. As I spoke, something changed. The phone grew warm in my hand. The screen flickered. It turned on. The battery read 3%, but the photos were there. I showed him the first one. My family at the beach, all of us laughing, covered in sand. The thing leaned in close. Its eyes, Grandpa's eyes, widened. "I can see them," it whispered. "I can see the moment. The warmth of the sun, the smell of the ocean, the taste of salt water." It was feeding on the memory, on the captured moment, and as it did, I felt something shift. The cabin became slightly more solid. The figures around me became slightly more translucent. I showed it another photo, and another. Each one drew more of its attention, pulled more of its essence away from the physical space. The phone battery ticked down. 2%. 1%. "Please," the thing said, and its voice was hungry, desperate. "More. Show me more." The phone died with a sad beep. The thing roared, a sound that shook the cabin to its foundations. The figures around me wailed, their voices rising in a cacophony of despair. But in that moment of distraction, as it raged at being denied its feast, I ran. I crashed through the cabin door and into the forest. Behind me, I could hear them coming, dozens of footsteps, the thing that wore my grandfather's face shouting my name. But something had changed. The forest was thinner now, more transparent. I could see through it, like looking through layers of gauze. And beyond the layers, I could see the real forest. My forest. I pushed through, fighting against the resistance, and suddenly I burst through into sunlight and real air and a world that felt solid under my feet. I was on the trail, the real trail. And there, parked at the trailhead a quarter-mile away, was Mr. Hutchins' truck. I ran toward it, screaming for help. Epilogue. They found me collapsed on the trail, dehydrated and delirious. I'd been missing for 3 days. The official story was that I'd gotten lost in the forest, become disoriented, and wandered in circles. Exposure and dehydration led to hallucinations. My parents never left me alone again after that. We sold the cabin. Or tried to. It's been on the market for 6 years now. No one who views it makes an offer. Most don't even finish the tour. They just get a feeling, they say, like they're being watched. I'm 20 now, in college. I've tried to put it behind me, to convince myself it was just a stress-induced breakdown. But sometimes, late at night, I'll check my phone and find new photos in my camera roll. Photos I didn't take. Photos of me, sleeping, studying, walking to class. Always taken from above, as if someone is standing on the ceiling, looking down. And in the background of each photo, if I zoom in close enough, I can see them. Pale faces in the darkness, all of them watching, all of them smiling, still waiting for me to come back.